Hello Ministers and welcome to this briefing. This briefing will discuss women's unequal access to economic equality. So women are more likely to face barriers in the job market, and as a result women are taking on more unpaid labour caring for children and family members, and this prohibits paid work. And a lack of affordable childcare means that women are more likely to take on lesser hours at work, and this is going to reduce their options and possibilities for promotions. So, next slide. Evidence of the problem. So one of the barriers that women face in work is that they're often being paid less than a man, and currently the gender pay gap in 2019 stood at 17.3%. And the fact of this is because of pay discrimination, and this is quite hard to quantify. However, this can include kind of occupational segregation, a history in the labour market, so whether a woman's working part-time, full-time, and has had caring roles, and these differences in hours do contribute. However, one of the reasons that women may face pay discrimination is that more women, especially young women, are taking on 0 hours contracts and face precarity in the job market. So the current figures taken by the Young Women's Trust stand at 43% compared to 35% of men. Now, the problem with this precarity in the 0 hours contract is that it fails to specify guaranteed working hours, and the worker must be available to work whether or not there is any work available. Now, as a result of the pandemic, these 0 hours sectors have had to shut down, and these can include things like working on bank, in the hospital sector, retail, food, and things like that. And in the Young Women's Trust representative sample survey, they surveyed 60 women, and they found that 19% of these women that they've surveyed have lost working hours. These women are on 0 hours contracts, and 20% have lost future work. Now, even when these women who've lost their jobs have kind of tried to get another job and reapply, 41% of these women did not hear anything back. And this shows that even when women are trying to get onto the job market, they're already facing discrimination and already at kind of a lower status. Now, the second reason is that women face kind of discrimination because of childcare. So they may be taking on these 0 hours contracts because they need something flexible to fit around their children. So when we look at the figures, 1 in 9 expectant or new mothers face discrimination in their workplace, which then force them to lose their job. And 1/3 of mums had to leave a job because of childcare costs. So when we've had a look, when Pregnant and Screwed Foundation has looked at the data, 15% of mothers have been made redundant or expected to be made redundant because of their childcare responsibilities and unpaid care responsibilities. And 46% of 19,950 women have said that a lack of childcare provision has played a role in them being made redundant. So this shows again that women are facing barriers regarding discrimination because they've got children, and again they've got to balance this. So now we'll quickly move on to the next point, is that women do face a lot of more unpaid labour responsibilities, and this unpaid labour in the UK alone is worth 140 billion to the UK economy. So during the pandemic, women have carried out 60% more unpaid work than average. And if we look at this graph on the left here, we can see that there's been an increase across the board of women doing unpaid labour. And then even if women have got a job and are able to work from home without all their sectors shutting down, the IFS have found that during the pandemic, their paid work is more likely to be interrupted by children. So women are doing 2 hours less of work a day because they're taking on more unpaid work to look after their children. And in total, they're only doing 47% of their working hours. Now, if we look at this evidence, this is quite problematic because these difficult labour conditions are going to exist for some time. The gender pay gap isn't really shrinking at the moment, and if more women are taking on 0 hour sectors, are being discriminated because of their unpaid care responsibilities and doing more unpaid care responsibilities. this is going to persist, and the reductions in paid work again are going to persist. Workers who have lost jobs are going to struggle to find new ones because there may be a gap on their CV. And also, especially women whose productivity is decreased are going to be penalised with regards to promotions and pay decisions because they're seen as they're not being productive enough. So, why does this problem exist? So, firstly, as we've already seen, that there's currently an unequal distribution of labour, with women taking on more of the brunt of it. And mothers and couples are 1.5 times more likely than fathers to say that they were doing the majority of childcare during school and nursery closures, and these nursery closures have really impacted women. The second one is expensive and impractical childcare. So childcare in the UK is probably one of the most expensive in Europe, and it's a barrier for women entering the labour market. So the Young Women's Trust have found that 2/3 of mums not in paid work were unable to take up paid work because childcare costs were so expensive. And 57% of women were unable to take up a job due to a lack of suitable options for childcare. So young mothers who have a child aged 0 to 2 are spending 1/2 and 2/3 of their salary on childcare, even when there's free childcare available for 3 to 4 year olds. That's absorbing 1/4 and 1/5 of a salary. So therefore, you're working to put your child in childcare to be able to work, when really, I don't think the system should be like that. And this means that there's a lack of flexibility because childcare centres are only open. Generally, they're 8 or 9 till round about 5ish, and then this restricts the jobs that women can take. So this may draw them into more precarious employment, like 0 hours and retail jobs and jobs like that. And then secondly, there's secrecy within the labour market. So as we've already touched on with pay discrimination, so 6 out of 10 women who worked alongside a man doing the same or similar work knew he was paid more, or they didn't actually know what he was earning. And only 24% of workplaces discuss their salary openly. And this secrecy is only going to continue if men and women are working from home. So only 4 in 10 employers in a survey by King's College London have got policies in place to mitigate against choosing people for a redundancy where they've had time off work for care responsibilities. Now, as we've seen from the evidence, is that women are more likely to be doing these unpaid care responsibilities. So therefore, they are more likely to lose a job and be made redundant because of these care responsibilities, and are more likely to be discriminated against. So therefore, we should move on to the policies. So the first policy idea is that in the short term, we should fund the childcare sector and eventually move towards a Scandinavian childcare model with government input. So before the pandemic, 3 out of 10 providers were already in a deficit. Now, a deficit defined by the IFS is that a nursery will receive £4 of income for every £5 of loss. Now, in the UK before the pandemic, there was 1.4 million children attending daycare. However, this reduced to 100,000 during the pandemic. Now, the government still paid for the 30 hours of funding. However, not all the nurseries may not have received the fees from parents. Now, the worst case scenario is that with no parental fees, 5 out of 10 of these nurseries will shut. So we should move on to Finnish policy. So Finnish policy states that all children are entitled to an education regardless of their parents' finances or social standing. And the fees are charged per month in relative to that parent's income. So per month it's around €264, and the highest you'll pay is about up to 300. However, this depends on where you're based. If you are not working or not earning anything, then you don't pay anything and you're entitled to the childcare hours. And if the parent doesn't want to put their child in childcare, then they are paid a living wage until that child is 3 years old. And therefore, I think we should adapt this to the UK system. Similarly, the nursery opening hours in Finland fit around lots of work schedules, so they're often open before 7 and shut after 5. However, in 3/4 of Finnish kind of councils and cities, they do operate a 24/7 care system for children, which allows women options in flexible work and also the sectors that they're working. So the pros of this is that women and families are supported with childcare, and it takes away the burden of balancing paid work and care. It values unpaid work and gives women gives them the option to look after children. However, the cons of this policy is that it may take a long time for this to happen. So the second one is a change in maternity and paternity laws. So the current paternity laws are that a man will have 2 weeks off on 90% pay, and mothers have 39 weeks paid maternity leave, and they earn at least £120. When the leave is shared, the woman and the father, the mother and the father will have 37 paid weeks, and both partners can have up to 50 weeks shared between them. However, any time after the 37 weeks is unpaid. And many people are unaware that shared parental leave is an option. So the law should change to create a longer reserved period of leave for fathers, and a rate should be paid high enough so that fathers can afford to take time off. There should be an increase in the amount of paid weeks for shared maternity leave from up to 37 to 40 to make it more appealing, and in both cases there should be a living wage in place. Similarly, on the government website, there is no information for fathers if they solely want to take this time off to look after their child, and I feel like this should be something considered within this policy as well. So the pros of this is that gender divisions are going to balance in the household, hopefully. Families will be more supported and they'll be more able to make a choice. And if there are equal laws in place entitling fathers and mothers to more leave and the same amount of leave, women's job prospects are going to be affected to a lesser extent. And men will be more encouraged to take up unpaid care. However, the cons of this is that only a third of men take up the 2 weeks paternity leave. So this is going to be quite a slow change to happen. So therefore, wider societal issues and why men aren't taking up this leave perhaps need to be looked at and considered. Excuse me. So thirdly, we should value women's unpaid care. So during the lockdown, women have taken on a lot more unpaid care in terms of household responsibilities and caring for children. And this caring for children, as we've seen, causes women to be discriminated against. So I think what we should do is put laws in place to kind of stop this gender discrimination within the workplace and have data available. Women who are unable to work because of childcare and may have not been working for some time, instead of the benefits that they usually receive, such as universal credit and kind of the limited income, the benefit system should be reformed to provide a living wage for women who have care responsibilities and are unable to find a job. And the stigmatisation of economically inactive should be removed, because even though women aren't earning, they are still active doing unpaid labour. So the pros, women are going to receive the recognition they deserve, but the cons are women may face stigmatisation. So the chosen policy should be to adopt a Scandinavian childcare model and fund the childcare system properly. Because as we've seen, underpinning all the problems is that women are facing a lot of unpaid care and they are discriminated in the workplace and they don't have the resources or the money to kind of access childcare in some cases. So if you give the women the childcare, they've got more flexibility in the workplace and are able to take on more paid work. So here are my references. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to any questions or comments.